You're listening to Mountain Heartbeat with Joe and Rosa Hopkins, proclaiming the gospel through word and through song.
Hi, and welcome to Mountain Heartbeat. I'm Joe Hopkins, and this week we're going to play for you an interview that Rosa conducted with Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson from Ken Ham's Ark Encounter.
So what is your take on what happens at conception from a scientific standpoint?
At the moment of conception, you have sperm meeting egg. You have the joining of two genomes, basically. This is a topic we're often discussing even in the creation-evolution debate, but relevant here as well. Dad's contributing half of the genetic information, but it's not that he's contributing the information for one arm and mom contributes the information for the other arm, or one ear or the other ear. It's dad contributes the information for the entire body, mom for the entire body, but they're in two different versions, so that's why you look like a blend, basically, of your parents. And at that moment, now, you need both. We know this genetically and scientifically because if your chromosomes change, which is just sort of subunits of all that DNA, so if you take off a fraction of that from either mom or dad's input, you have huge abnormalities. You think about Down syndrome, that's one extra chromosome. You take away some of these other chromosomes, and in fact, if you talk to physicians, they'll say the reason we don't really see any of these chromosome abnormalities for the bigger chromosomes is because they're probably all lethal. So you need the full complement from both parents for the baby to develop and survive. So scientifically, at the moment of conception, you have the joining, basically, of these instructions that allows this baby then to develop. Of course, scientifically, this doesn't come with a label that says when life begins. That's ultimately a moral, philosophical, religious question, and scientists often miss that distinction as if, somehow this comes with a label and says, oh, now life begins. No, this is a judgment that you have to make from a moral, philosophical perspective, and science isn't going to tell you exactly one way or the other. You can impose that on the scientific data, but it's not that science dictates morality.
So, from a scientific perspective, when would you say that life begins?
At the moment of fertilization, I think we can, again, ultimately this is a moral question, and I think you go to Psalm 51, where David speaks of his own conception. From in sin my mother did conceive me. Now I was in a class once at Harvard, and someone said, "Well, that's talking about sex. That's talking about intercourse. That's what." No. That's not what it's talking about at all. God isn't labeling reproduction, copulation as sinful. That was, the command "be fruitful and multiply" was a blessing from God in the beginning. So that verse, David says, surely I was sinful from birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. He doesn't say sinful from the time my mother conceived a blob of tissue that eventually over 9 months' time became me. He was David, King David, from the beginning. And so as soon as sperm and egg meet, and I think it just makes sense, sperm and egg don't meet unless a man loves a woman and so forth, without getting too many of the birds of the bees. So when fertilization happens, and I'm drilling down to those little details just because now we can. 250 years ago, this wouldn't even be a discussion because people didn't know these details, and I don't think the Scripture needed to record these level of details for us. But at the moment of conception, which I'd say is the moment of fertilization, that's when life begins. That's taking what the Scripture explicitly says and applying it to our modern understanding of science.
Okay. So there are many different debates, pro-life, pro-choice, different things, but scientifically speaking, is there any evidence that a woman is carrying at any point in the pregnancy anything other than a human child?
No. As soon as conception, fertilization happens, that is a genetically unique individual. To my knowledge, no one has yet done a human cloning, which is probably the only theoretical way you could make a clone of mom. So in every single example, basically, to date, what mom is carrying is a genetically unique individual. So if someone is looking for a scientific reason to say this is somehow just an extension of the mother's uterus, they would really be scratching their heads to find a justification for why. They might say, well, embryo is dependent upon mom. Well, so what? We're dependent upon parents at all sorts of stages, or on other people at all stages of life, even after birth. Kids are untaught. Even the baby is dependent on mother's milk or some sort of formula substitute, which again points back to the need for the mother. Kids are untaught and untrained and need parents to watch over them, protect them, provide for them through many of their early years. You get to the end of your life and you're becoming incapacitated. You need your kids you're dependent on kids and other people again. So genetically, the embryo is unique from the start, from the moment of fertilization. And if pro-life opponents want to boot the question out to the question of dependency, they're going to have a really tough time not advocating the killing of all sorts of people outside the womb.
Absolutely. And so you're talking about dependency, and sometimes people, they go into viability as determining when an abortion is legal, etc. But so that also goes into the question of saying that, well, it's a woman's body. It's my body. But in fact, would science not support that there are two bodies, because you're saying that the embryo is a distinct individual from the mother at the time of conception? So what does science say about the assertion that it's the mother's body? It's just one person at stake here, and just a clump of cells that she would be getting rid of?
I guess to those who would say it's the mother's body, I'd say, why does the fetus suppress the maternal immune system? The maternal immune system wants to kick it out as something foreign. And if it's in fact a part of the mother's own body, that system should not exist. So again, when you look at the details, I think it's difficult to make the case that this is mom's choice, mom's body, mom's tissue that she can get rid of. No, this is something unique from the start that happens to be in a unique dependent relationship with mom for 9 months. But at no point is this somehow mom and then it evolves into something, a baby, at some arbitrary distinction. This is baby from the beginning.
Absolutely. And so because they're often referred to as a clump of cells when they're at certain stages of development, what does science have to say about that? Because we're learning now that there can be a heartbeat established as early as 29 days. So, I mean, how does the scientific community actually view what often pro-choice people will refer to as simply a clump of cells?
It's a concept, I guess, to use it word differently, it's continually evolving. I think of the field of developmental biology as probably the biggest black box of biology in existence currently. We made great strides in understanding genetics, but understanding how a linear chemical code in the form of DNA is translated into a three-dimensional physical structure that moves through time is still one of the biggest puzzles of biology. So as scientists continue to discover, you can find that viability is being pushed back further and further. Sure, are there stages at which you don't yet see the brain or you don't yet see the heart beating? Yes, but I think that the progress embryonic stem cell research has made itself points towards the fact that this is a unique, different, separate human being. People talk about, well, adult versus embryonic stem cells. What's the potential for each of these therapeutically? I said, look, in theory, embryonic stem cells hold the potential for more therapeutic possibilities because they can form every cell of the body. But that fact alone should give you pause. What is the only other source where you can get any cell of the body that you want? A living, breathing human adult. If you kill them, you have access, in theory, to any cell of the body that you want to. So why don't people stop and say, wait a minute, when we destroy an embryo, we have access and potentially to any cell of the human body. So I think it's really hard to escape, to me, the plain implications that whenever the heart starts beating, whenever the brain starts, you can detect brain waves. This is a group of cells or a single cell that has a very definite destiny, and it has no other destiny that other than the one that's been set in place at fertilization. And so to try to tease out these different lines of viability versus non-viability, heartbeat or feeling pain or not feeling pain, is missing the bigger picture. And that bigger picture, to me, comes even from the earliest stages from which we harvest embryonic stem cells. And again, the potential these cells hold matches exactly the potential that a full human, living, breathing adult body has, which should give the people who are advocating for it pause and say, wait a minute, this looks like it's basically fully human. And that should be sufficient reason for them to not do it.
Wow. So what do you believe science has shown that we are doing when we perform an abortion? And is that different depending on the stage of development?
Abortion is ending human life, whether it's 2 seconds after fertilization or right before the baby exits the womb. It's at a different stage of development because you have to begin somewhere, and there's a set program that is enacted to build head, torso, arms, legs, fingers, toes, and so forth. But unlike what the evolutionists used to say, perhaps 100 years ago, we don't go through a fish stage and a reptile stage and a mammal stage and then a primate stage and a human stage. It's a human from the beginning, and uniquely human at the genetic level, and a unique individual at the genetic level from the start. So if I cut off my arm, does that mean I'm less human suddenly and people can do with me what they want? No. If you harvest a baby and kill it at the 6-day stage versus the 6-month stage, is there a difference? No. It's a human throughout all of it. It's just different stages of development.
Okay, so does science, in any of the research that you have ever done or have ever heard, does science in any way support the idea that abortion actually supports women's health?
No. You're interrupting what the body has been designed to do, which is nurture and grow a baby, and you're artificially cutting that off. And I'm not a physician or OB/GYN, but there's physiological processes that are designed to deal with this, and this is unnatural. So this is not assisting a woman by killing the life within her. It's killing a life and causing the woman all sorts of irreparable harm. That doesn't mean she can't be a Christian or that somehow she's committed the unpardonable sin. There's forgiveness within Christianity for sins of all types, and Corinthians talks about all sorts of sins that the people of Corinth used to participate in but have now been forgiven. So that's not to say somehow the women who've had abortions should walk around with a shroud of condemnation hanging over them for the rest of their life. There's forgiveness through Christ and through the cross. But the other side of that is not to diminish what's going on, and what's going on is the ending of a independent, separate human life.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today on our show, Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us this week on Mountain Heartbeat. We're going to leave you with a song called Give Me a Song to Sing. If you'd be interested in this song or many of our others for free, you can find them on lifeinsidethehouseontherock.com at the music link.
Give me a song to sing, and I will sing it to the King. Oh, come, let us sing and worship Him. Give me a song to sing, and I will sing it to the King. Oh, come, let us worship all day long. Enter to His gates, come, O ye with praise, come with songs of thanksgiving. Make a joyful noise, praises to the Lord, serve the King with all gladness. Give me a song to sing, and I will sing it to the King. Oh, come, let us sing and worship Him. Give me a song to sing, and I will sing it to the King. Oh, come, let us worship all day long. Come into His gates, all whom God has made, He and not we ourselves. We are not our own, we to Him belong, we the sheep of His pasture. Give me a song to sing, and I will sing it to the King. Oh, come, let us sing and worship Him. Give me a song to sing, and I will sing it to the King. Oh, come, let us worship all day long. Bless His holy name, speak unto His fame, for the Lord He is goodness, truth forevermore, for His love is sure, and His mercies are forever.